HorrorDeconstruction.
What's up, everybody? It's the HorrorDeconstruction. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, but mostly on YouTube. Give us a like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon. Share our links. Check out our merchandise on teespring.com on the link below. With your host, Komp, for today's solo deconstruction. Today's film is CENSOR 2021. After viewing a strangely familiar video nasty, Enid, a film censor, sets out to solve the past mystery of her sister's disappearance, embarking on a quest that dissolves the line between fiction and reality. Directed by Prano Bailey Bond, written by Prano Bailey Bond and Anthony Fletcher, starring Niam Algar, Michael Smiley, and Nicholas Burns. So, I want to first say, because this is a new film that's just coming out, I must put a statement about HD as a show itself. This isn't a bad statement. This is just a general statement that we do not go out to shit on movies. That is not the case for HorrorDeconstruction. We want to find good horror movies. We want people to, learn about good horror movies and go out and seek them for themselves. Series or horror shows and stuff like that. And it's not. I don't know if we're jaded. I don't know if we're just tired. We're not tired of horror movies because we wouldn't do this show anymore. But I'm just taking this simple precedent and saying this because it seems like this will be a movie that a lot of people will like, but for some reason I myself was just like about. So I'm just trying to say, because before somebody says, "Oh, they're full of shit. They're just looking to shit on a movie," it's like, no, it's not. It really isn't. I would love to see a good horror movie. I love seeing good horror movies. I love talking about good horror movies. But as we always say, we're not the be all end all of what a horror movie should be, and because it's just taste. It's subjective. So with that, I will go in with a pretty spoiler-free review of CENSOR 2021 with a review on it. So, basic premise of this film is that there's this young lass named Enid Baines, played by Niam Algar. Very good actor. This whole film every actor in this film is fantastic in it. They're really well done roles in this film. And this young lady is a censor. This is taking place in the 80s when I guess the video nasties situation was happening in England or Europe and stuff like that. So if you don't know what a video nasty is, that is a certain classification that horror films received in the UK when they were considered, legally not watchable for people. Essentially, they were censoring films for en masse, so people at home can't watch, say, like Evil Dead or stuff like that. Evil Dead is pretty tame compared to some of the other types of video nasty movies that were put out there. But this was pretty prevalent. So this is coming from Wikipedia. Video nasty is a colloquial term in the United Kingdom to refer to a number of films, typically low-budget horror and exploitation films, distributed on video cassette that were criticized for their violent content by the press, social commentators, and various religious organizations. So essentially this was a Puritan sort of push against showing any sort of horror film, much like, the ESRB, or, how that was formed when the family values people were trying to take away video games from kids, like Mortal Kombat or stuff like that. I think that's interesting. I think that's a much more interesting premise than the film itself, because I think the film, which the video nasty movies are, I think for the most part, video nasties, if I'm just taking a guess, because I'm not really familiar with the UK censoring, but they're films like slasher films, or like Cannibal Holocaust, or like mostly slasher films. And I think let me give you a list of some of the video nasties that are. I'm looking at the website called Little White Lies, lwlies.com. So there's films like I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses, Contamination, The Killer Nun, Expose, The Boogeyman, The Funhouse. So these are movies that seem to be more slasher genre than they would be giallo. And the thing is, CENSOR is clearly a giallo type of film. It does have one or two moments of slasher stuff in it. Well, 3 moments. but it's mostly focused as a giallo film. And giallo films are slasher films. They're just really art house sort of slasher films. If you know what a giallo film, those are European art house sort of slasher movies that if you want to see movies like that, there's obviously Dario Argento, and that's the name that instantly pops up. So this film is sort of structured like a giallo, and I think that if the film had been structured like a slasher, sort of like, although what the fuck do I know? I might ruin the movie that way, but it's more like the film. There's a movie called Sweet Home. I think it was Dream Home or Sweet Home. It was Dream Home. This Chinese horror film, Dream House. Sorry, and that was like a slasher film about a woman who was obsessed with attaining the perfect apartment for herself, and that was more hardcore, and that felt like a video nasty type of horror film that, this was trying to be sort of a fancier version of. And I think that what kind of screws this movie up is that it's trying to be a lot more profound than it is, because we're following Enid, right? She works in the censor board, whether these films get a certain rating or not, whether they get put into video stores and stuff like that. And she's working with a bunch of co-workers, and they stumble upon this film by this unknown director, that Frederick North. The person that brings it in is this guy who's a producer of films. His name is Doug Smart, played by Michael Smiley, who's a great actor. If you've seen him in Kill List, you'll recognize him. He was the other guy in Kill List. He was great. He's a great actor. And anyway, so he's a real sleazebag in this film. He plays it perfectly. The company that Enid is working for gets in trouble because there's they find out on the news this guy claims that, or the news itself claims that this guy was watching video nasties, which made him kill his family, which is, one of those sort of sensationalist news headlines that people use when they, instantly want to point a finger at something that they can't control. So it's most likely it was bullshit, because we find out later on, and the guy, well, I don't want to spoil the movie. That's just a sort of a side thing to get Enid the focus of people. That's just a reason to have a group of people just sort of focus their anger at her. And so that's I wish they would have got more into that. I wish I would have seen that more. But what I think the film is trying to do is that they're trying to show Enid's loss of reality and going mentally insane, but it almost seems like it comes out of nowhere. Sure, we do find out she watches this film, right, by this guy named Frederick North, and it triggers something within her. Apparently, and it's not really explained what the hell happened, but she watches this film called Don't Go Into the Church, and in the film, these two young girls go into a church, or one goes into the church and the other one follows her and decides to kill her with an axe, right? And this really triggers something in Enid that she's like, whoa, this reminds her of a time where her little sister vanished in the woods. But the thing is, we don't see, I know giallo films, less is more for them, where you're supposed to guess what the hell is happening for the most part, and that's happening here. This is modern times. I think people need to have a little bit more explanation for their movies. Sure, we know that her sister disappeared. Sure, we know that was a profound sort of situation for her to take, for Enid to take, but I don't buy it. I don't understand. I don't buy it. It just seems like the film was only like an hour and 15 minutes, and I literally was like, I don't feel like anything happened in the movie. It's very strange to see that like nothing happened, or everything happened so quick, because it is following that giallo, languishing shots, everything. The film is gorgeous. The movie looks gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and it didn't feel really creepy to me. It just looked really beautifully. It looked really beautiful for what it was supposed to be, but it didn't follow through. So I think the main problem with this movie for me, myself, is that it looks great, but it truly is empty inside. It's really trying to be more than it is. And they could have fixed it by adding a half an hour to the movie. Something of, material that felt weighty, because this feels fluffy. It feels like there's nothing underneath it, like there's just a skeleton of an idea here. And we get that she's losing her mind, but the jump to her losing her mind is so quick. And I guess we're supposed to be like, oh yeah, Enid has carried this trauma for so long of her sister being missing, and her family is like saying, listen, her sister's dead, she's never going to come back. So that's what would make her snap. But it's just like, really? It's like that, like fucking the Incredible Hulk, she just snaps and turns into a crazy person. You got to give us a little bit more of her losing her mind, as opposed to her just overnight becoming a completely different, well, not a completely different person, but this sort of we understand she's played very timid, and her losing her mind towards the end of the film, and whatever happens there, I don't want to get too into it. This is us basically telling you, or me telling you, I'm not speaking for Danny because he hasn't seen the film at the time of this recording. It is a film that is trying to make you believe a loss of sanity, but it seems like it's at such a record pace of filmmaking. You need to have time taken with this. But here's the good thing: if you're a person who's into gore, there are 2 really good gore scenes in this film, really nicely done. I can't spoil what they are, but they're pretty graphic. They're not as graphic as I would like a film based on censorship should be. I think you should go to original Peter Jackson levels of gore if you're gonna do that type of thing. They do that here, and it's still the gore still looks a little bit too clean. It still looks a little Disney. It is graphic gore, but it still is a little Disney gore, if you know what I mean. It's very clinical, very fake looking, which is fine. What if that's what you're into? But I think that the acting across the board is really good. The design is great. The directing is even good. It's just that I can't believe 2 writers were behind this, and it was so short. And I think they wanted to make the film as tight as possible, which is what they do. They make it very tight. In fact, it's so tight that you blink and the movie's over, which is weird. Which I think is good. It's interesting because that's good pacing for a film. But I don't know how good pacing a film could be if you don't buy half of this shit. And watching a horror film, you want to believe that this is happening. And maybe you just want to have fun and watch a slasher film, this is for you then. But, we've seen so many movies where like, okay, we've seen so many horror movies, like, all right, give us something more than what you're showing us. And I don't know if that's an arrogant a train of thought to watch a horror film. You want to be entertained. I was slightly entertained by the film. I didn't completely shit on it, but I think that there's something, and I can't put my finger on it, severely missing from this film itself. And I think it has to deal with Enid's jump to insanity, because it's just way too quick of a plot point. And I get why they're doing it, because that's the whole purpose of the film. You want to make it this sort of it's a giallo light, and giallo light movies should not happen. It's sort of like we did this other giallo film called Housewife, and that was just another thing where it was just like, what the fuck did they write here? It just doesn't make any sense. And that's fine. Giallo movies don't have to make sense. But that Housewife movie was the same thing as this. Like, it looked really nice, but I think that they were relying too much on giallo tropes to tell the film, as opposed to putting a solid foundation and having a good story there. And that's what happens. If you just want to see a giallo slasher film, sort of okay. Because we like giallo. Well, I like giallo films. I don't know if Danny likes giallo films. And you want a little bit more. Now, especially now, when you can write good films now, And this is an age of, it always seems to be horror is in a renaissance moment. It always happens. It always, every 2 or 3 years, or every 4 years, is a great, batch of horror films, and this should have been one of them, especially with censorship and how people are mostly aware of video nasty films. So I think in that case, this film did not live to its potential. It did not become sort of a cultish, classicist type of film that it should be, and that's a really disappointment. And I think that everything else looks great. It's a beautiful package, but with nothing underneath it. So what you want to do, well, let me give you some positives. There's as opposed to the visuals, there's a scene where Enid walks into a dark hallway. There are great progressive shots, transition shots. There's this interesting tracking video shot that they do where they go between reality and the video, sort of VHS look to it. The acting obviously is very good in this film. The soundtrack is really good. So that is one thing that is very important for this type of film. The blood is good. The deaths in it are pretty cool. There's one sort of hinky, weird puppetry death that I think they were trying to be shocking, and it was just like it really was corny for me. That happens toward the end that I was like, oh boy. Where they were trying to, it seems like it was trying to be horror, mind-bending, horror profound, and it was just like, get out of here with that. It was just super corny. It looked cool, but it was just such a corny moment. So that for the most part works. Look, so if you just want to see a surface level type of horror movie, then this is for you. If you watch this because the movie's so quick, it's sort of like, okay, whatever. That's the type of thing. But the thing you don't want, I don't want that for a horror movie. I want a horror movie where I go, oh, check out this movie. This shit was dope. That's not with me with this. So I'm just doing a mild complaint, and people might think I'm just overreacting with that. And I'm sorry about that. But do something more. Give us something more, guys. And with that, I would give this rating. I would give this film a 6. I was gonna give it a 5, but a 6 because of how everything else looks fantastic. No, fuck that. A 5.5 out of 10. Being a poor actor with gigantism who probably can't get a lot of roles and getting into a bit of a pickle with a woman who's not even an actor. And with that, this has been the Horror Deconstruction.
The HorrorDeconstruction.